Hello again, precious friends. Welcome back. Time for our next video. I hinted in my last video that I had been experimenting, and I've been experimenting with something that I was inspired to do by watching Maria Emmerich's content and Nisha Berry's content. And they've been experimenting with something called chicken flour. And there's places you can buy it apparently now online. It's pretty expensive. What I saw was about $25 for about 6 ounces of chicken flour. And it's just basically powdered, dehydrated chicken breast. And I imagine that the reason why it's so expensive is probably because it's probably pastured chicken, and because it costs money to stabilize and make shelf stable something as fragile as fresh chicken meat. So I imagine there's a lot that goes into dehydrating it and making it and packaging it so that it's shelf stable. And I thought, that might be something that I could cobble together at home. It started with me making a recipe by Maria Emmerich. She was showing how to make homemade chicken luncheon meat, like for sandwiches, like you could make sandwiches on like carnivore bread or something like that. And I thought maybe I would try it. And I tried it, and I realized I didn't like it that well. It seemed pretty dry. And I thought maybe I might try experimenting some other things that would improve the texture a little bit. But as I was trying to think of something to do with the, chicken loaf I had already made, I ground it up to see if I could make some sort of bread substitute out of it. And when I got it all ground up, I realized it was really very flour-like. And so I've been experimenting with it. I've got a pretty decent recipe for a bread substitute out of it. And I have breaded and fried cheese with it, which was very interesting. So we're going to go into all of that stuff. Oh, I've also made carnivore pancakes with it, which my husband really enjoyed. And we're going to go into all of those things. But first, I'm going to show you how I made the chicken flour. Okay, so let's get started. So it's going to be made out of 100% chicken breast, which I can get for $3 a pound or thereabouts, or sometimes $2 a pound if I'm willing to buy a good amount of it at one time. I can get it sometimes for $2 a pound at the restaurant supply store if I'm willing to buy 20 pounds of it or something like that. But, I can eat that much chicken really over, a 3 or 4 month period of time, which once I freeze it is fine. But anyway, I'll probably be eating more chicken if this, works out to be as versatile as I'm suspecting it will be. So let's get started. So we're going to start with, of course, our hardware, as we always do. We're going to be using our food processor for this. I suppose you could use a blender for this if you had something powerful like a Vitamix. I don't know that you could use an ordinary standard jar blender for this. I wouldn't attempt it. And a regular old meat grinder probably wouldn't be sufficient for this either. It wouldn't chop the bits up fine enough, in my opinion. So, I'm using the food processor, whatever that is. Let's get that out of there. And we are also going to need a non-reactive baking dish. I have made it in a loaf pan. This is about the same volume as a loaf pan. It's just a tiny square. Might call it a brownie pan, I guess. And you'll need a piece of parchment paper that's cut to fit the dish, and a piece of aluminum foil. This is standard weight aluminum foil, doubled, sufficient to cover, crimp over the edges of the pan. That's going to be our hardware. Software is going to be just chicken. Oh, there's some chicken fat in there, which I'm storing for later. Not going to use that in this recipe, so I'm just going to take it out for the time being and set it aside. There we go. Because I use that chicken fat. Sometimes I'll just fry it up and eat it like a snack. But right here we have 500 grams of raw chicken breast. That's about a little tiny bit more than a pound. It's a convenient measurement for Britishers and Americans. So 500 grams, a little bit over 1 pound. It's about 17 and a half ounces. And that's chopped into about 1-inch chunks, as you can see. Okay? And that's it for the ingredients. We're not going to season this at all. We're not going to salt it because we want to keep it just plain chicken. So what I'm going to do is, here I need to get my spatula. Which I neglected to wash from its last usage, so one moment. As I've often liked to say, if I was absolutely organized, the world might come to an end. It'll be a jinx if I ever remember something like, oh, to shut up the dang phone. Oh my goodness. Okay. You get me with all my warts here, folks. That's how it works. So what I'm going to do is we're going to chop up the chicken meat really super fine into what would be called in French cuisine a farce. The meat is good. It's raw, starting raw and cold, and it's going to be completely pureed. You want to start with it cold from the refrigerator. And I'm going to turn my processor on, leave it running, and we're going to feed the chicken down into the feed tube. And process it, and we're going to stop periodically to scrape down and redistribute the meat. Oh, and I almost forgot. We're going to need a little bit of water. We're going to need a few tablespoons of water. What we got right here. Okay. So here we go. There's a little bit of chicken juice. I'm going to pour that into. And you'll see that it has formed a ball in there. Now we don't want that because the ball will just roll and roll and roll around, and it won't really... the stuff that's in the center of the mass here won't really impact the blade. So we're going to open this up after about 30 seconds of processing and redistribute this mass here around the bottom of the food processor. Scrape down the sides, because even these little tiny rice grain sized chunks are larger than we want. We want this as uniformly processed as we can. We want it to be a fine paste, as fine as we can get it. And so we're going to put this back in. We're going to restart the processor, and I'm going to pour in just enough water so that... Ooh, there's a little chunk right here. Let me put that back down in the bottom. There. Like I say, we don't want chunks, even little tiny chunks. There we go. We're going to start the processor again, and as it's running, I'm going to add some water just to the point where it no longer will form a ball that rolls around. It may form a bit of a ball, but as long as the ball breaks up again, it'll be fine, and you'll see what it looks like as it's going. You see the ball is starting to loosen up after about a tablespoon of water or so. Now you may have seen a sort of a ball moving around the inside of it, but what's happening is the ball will bunch up and then spread out again, and it'll bunch up and spread out again. And that means that the whole ball, there's nothing being carried on the inside of the mass. The whole mass is moving through the processor and is impacting the blades, and that's what we want. So we're going to scrape down again, and we're going to redistribute this mass again just to make sure we're getting even. This doesn't usually take very long. Sometimes you'll find big pieces of gristle that don't break down very well. Here, I think I see one right here. Connective tissue. And if you see one of those, you can take it out. See right here. This looks like a piece of cartilage. And so we're just going to take it out. I'll put it over in the doggy's dish because he likes it. That'll be good for him. So redistribute. And then we're going to run it for probably about another 30 seconds or so. I'm going to move the camera so you can see in through the side of the... As you can see how it's moving, it's not bunching up. All of the mass is impacting the blades, and that's what we want. There we go. Take that off. Scrape down. No chunks this time. And we're going to do just a few more seconds just to make sure. There we are. Now this is going to be the consistency of like heavy cookie dough. Heavy wet cookie dough, or like super, super, super thick baby food. This is completely pureed, right? No chunks at all. Okay, now, here's the fun part. We're moving over here to our dish. And what we're going to do is we're going to load this. Whoops, excuse me. We are going to load this into our dish. Let me adjust my lighting here because my shadow is just terrible. It's still pretty bad, but that's okay. It is what it is. So we're going to load this into our dish. We don't need to oil it or grease it or nothing. It will not stick. We're going to, it has to be a non-reactive vessel. You can use ceramic. You can use a pie plate. You can use anything that you want to. This just happens to be a convenient sized dish that this amount of chicken will fit well into. I've done it in a loaf pan. In fact, you'll see that in a little bit. because this process takes a while, so I have one pre-done so that you can see what it looks like. And I did that one in a glass loaf pan. Now I am, because of my training, obsessed with scraping down bowls and things. So I could sit here and spend a half an hour scraping this down, but I won't make you. I won't make you watch that. Just going to get a little bit more off. I'll sit here and spend 10 minutes getting everything humanly possible off of this blade. But like I said, I won't make you watch me do that. We're just going to get everything humanly reasonable out of here. Now, you don't have to worry about the water we put in here, because as you will see, the water's going to come back out, which is fine. So we just add some water to help with processing, and the water is going to come right back out by itself. So the water is not going to be an issue. Now that we have this all loaded in here, we're just going to push it into the corners. You don't really have to worry about air pockets because this is all going to get ground up again anyway. I tried doing the thing, I tried an experiment where I cooked it first in whole pieces and then ground it up, but I found I had an issue with texture. So I found that grinding it first and then cooking it and then grinding it again gave me a much better texture. And it actually required less grinding. It took a long time to get it ground up fine enough when I cooked the chicken first and then ground it. It's odd, but the two grindings made it a much more superior texture as far as I'm concerned. Now, we've got this pressed into the bottom, and we're going to put our parchment paper over the top. Just press it down just like this. You've already cut it to fit. And we have our oven preheated to 200 degrees. So, the reason we're putting the parchment paper on here is because we don't want the heat to form a skin on the top layer of the chicken. Just an interesting aside, that's called a pellicle, when you have a layer that forms a kind of a skin on a mass like this. But anyway, so we don't want a pellicle, we don't want a skin to form, so we're going to put our foil on. It doesn't need to be airtight, it just needs to be tight enough to stay in place and stable. Okay, so it's ready to go in. And we're gonna put it in our oven back there. And we're gonna take out the one I have already made in the loaf pan. So the oven's at 200 degrees, and this has been in here for about 2.5 hours. It's actually been in there less than that because I put it back in the oven so I could show me taking it out, which is why I managed to take it out without an oven mitt. But this is what it's going to look like when it comes out. You're going to take the top off. It's going to cook about 2 hours, and you need it to be at least 160 degrees. You can see it's very firm. You need it to be 160 degrees. It can be up to 200 degrees, but you need it to be at least 160 degrees. And you pull this off, pull off the parchment, and you will see there is a lot of water in here. This is what I mean by all that water is going to come off. This is the natural chicken juice, and it's the water that was added for processing. It's all squeezed out. And you can throw the water away if you want to, but I think it would be just a terrible mistake, because this water right here is the most delicious chicken broth. I mean, there's nothing in it but chicken. But it's just, if you like chicken, it's so delicious, and it makes a wonderful hot drink. You can even dilute it with a little bit more water if you want to, and make a whole cup of it. But it is so good. You can put it in with your chicken broth. I just drink it because it's so delicious. It's like the best chicken soup you ever had. Anyway, there's about a half a cup of water that's going to come out of it. I just drink it up because it's delicious. Now, look down here. This is just going to come right out. See? I told you it wasn't going to stick or nothing. It's still pretty wet, and we don't want all that liquid in our chicken flour. So since the oven is already on, we are going to dry this out a little bit. So I'm going to get me my knife. And we're just going to cut it up in a half-inch-ish or so slices. Just like that. And you can see it kind of does look like chicken lunch meat, or processed like chicken patty meat, which is basically what it is. And we're just going to stick it, just going to set it down on this cookie sheet. And we're going to put it back in the oven for a little while to dry out. Probably for about another half an hour. You can put it on any kind of a sheet container you want to. You can even just put it on foil if you want to. I just find that this little pan that I have is very convenient for it. So we go back in the oven at 200 degrees still. And of course, since I don't want y'all to have to wait around, here's one that I did before. And it's been in the refrigerator. Now, this is going to have to go back in the food processor. So I'm going to have to wash the food processor since I don't have two food processors. So give me just a minute. I'm going to pause the video and I'll be right back once I've got my food processor washed up and reassembled. Okay? I'll see you in a minute. Hello again. Welcome back. I got everything all cleaned up and ready to go again. This is my dried chicken loaf. Basically the same thing that I put in the oven, but it was in the oven for about an hour. Excess moisture dried off of it. This will not be shelf stable like the chicken flour that you can buy online will be. This will have to be kept in the refrigerator, but I don't think it needs to be shelf stable as long as you're planning on using it. Or you can put it in the freezer. It'll be freezer stable, and you probably can keep it in the freezer for about a year if it's well wrapped in a Ziploc bag. But, so we're just gonna break this into chunks into the food processor. I know this seems like a lot of trouble to go to, but wait till you see the kinds of things we can make with this stuff. And you can make a whole bunch. And like I said, you could put it in the freezer, or just, it'll keep in the refrigerator for a couple of weeks. This started out as 500 grams of chicken, and I'm sorry, I didn't stop to think to weigh how much of this it ended up being. But maybe I'll do that when the other one comes out, and I'll put it in the show notes if I can remember. So there we go. And we're going to turn this on, and we're just going to let it process a while until it's finely ground and it's going to get fluffy. It doesn't take very long at all. This has only been, what, like 10 seconds, and it's almost there. There we are. If you let it go too long, it'll start to ball up again. But if you just see it start to ball up, just stop, because this is what it looks like. It looks like the texture of wet sand. It's really interesting. And so we're going to dump it out of here now. We get a container. See, the second grinding really doesn't take that long, and I found that the entire grind time doing the 2 grinds was actually shorter than the grind time that it took when I cooked it first. So here is our chicken flour. Now, if you wanted to make it shelf stable, you could just put it on a cookie sheet in your oven, set to the lowest setting, 170 to 200 degrees or whatever, until it was completely desiccated. I don't know if that would make it shelf stable or not. I would still keep it in the refrigerator, because I just don't know if it would be shelf stable or not. I don't know enough about this stuff. It seems like it ought to be, but I don't know if a specific humidity would be low enough to make it shelf stable without additional treatment. So I would not attempt to make this shelf stable if I were you, unless you're a food chemist and you have the equipment to make sure that it was absolutely desiccated enough to remain shelf stable. Anyway, this could be extraordinarily dangerous if it was not sufficiently desiccated, and it could grow really nasty toxic boogers if it wasn't processed properly. So I do not recommend you try to make this shelf stable simply by desiccating it in your oven. keep it like this. You can dry it if you want to, but keep it in the refrigerator or in the freezer, just for your own safety. I mean, it might end up being safe, but I don't know, so I can't recommend that you do it. But anyway, this is it. Here we go, chicken flour. Now, I have some really neat things that I'm going to show you how to do. We're going to make a carnivore bread substitute that has no dairy. Now, I know most of my carnivore goodies that I have made are influenced at least by dairy, if not largely dairy. And I know that there are some people who don't do dairy. The chicken bread that we're going to do in an upcoming video, it's going to be dairy free. It's going to be mostly chicken and eggs with a little bit of xanthan gum or guar gum, probably xanthan gum, because xanthan gum is marginally more carnivore than guar gum. But either way, either one will work. So that's it for right now. Thank you for joining me. We are going to get to some really, really fun, interesting recipes, but we don't have time to do that right now. This has been long enough, and I love you all. I wish you peace, love, and meat, and I will see you soon with some really, really, really fun stuff. Bye.